Hey. So fun. I'm so excited to talk about some really fun topics today.
Yeah, this will be fun.
I know. Love to start by talking about garlic, all things garlic, because
Okay.
as you know, Laura, my one of my favorite foods on the planet is garlic. I am a garlic, what do you call that? Like when you love garlic a ton. I don't want to say
Uh-huh.
garlic phobia, but that's
Aholic.
a garlicaholic. Thank you. I'm a garlicaholic. When a recipe says, "Hey, chop up two cloves of garlic," I'm like, put in 6 or 8. Like, I'm always doubling or tripling the garlic in my recipes because it's one of my favorite flavor profiles, and I know it is for you
Mm-hmm.
too. It's one of our absolute favorites.
Yeah.
Um, and I know when a couple of years ago, I was at your house one day and you had told me you were kind of like, you were in this really cool space, right? And you were like really trying to practice like creating one meal per week of all the food that you had produced in your own garden to like create a sustainable meal once a week. And I was like, that is so inspiring. And as we were talking about that, you told me that the first food that you ever became fully sustainable in was garlic. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Because in my mind at that time, garlic was this really abstract thing to grow. I didn't know anything about it. And then you explained it to me, and all of a sudden I was like, I can see why you were sustainable with that one first.
Yeah,
So
it's super
I'd
cool.
love to hear about your story with the garlic
Uh-huh.
and then how you actually do the sustainability thing, or how you even just grow garlic, how you plant it.
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, so it was the one of the first things that I had. What I mean by sustainable is that I was able to grow enough garlic that I didn't have to purchase any garlic at the grocery store for an entire year. And my stored garlic lasted until my next harvest. So
That is
that's what
so
I mean by
cool.
sustainable. So I was able to grow an entire year's supply of garlic of what we were using. So that
So
was
cool.
super cool. So I think the two that I was the most sustainable on was garlic and pickles. So I had
Cool.
had a bumper crop of cucumbers, and I was had stored enough cucumbers and pickles that I didn't have to buy any at the store. That's a really cool feeling to me, to be able to like, I have enough of this that I don't need to buy anything at the grocery store. Super fun. So that's kind of what's inspiring to me, is to work toward goals like that in our gardening efforts to be more self-sufficient. And that is what we're really passionate about, is self-sufficiency and working toward that and be able to know how to do that better in our lives. Um, yeah, so I started growing garlic many years ago, and at first I was just learning how the process went and what worked and what didn't, right? And then I gradually built, and then one year I planted a whole bunch of garlic, and it lasted almost the entire year. So the next year I was like, okay, my goal for the year is to grow enough garlic that I don't have to plant any or buy any at the store, sorry. And I like was able to hit that goal, and then now I grow enough to be able to sell as well. So that's really fun. So,
What a cool thing, like to see that progression in your story, right? Like,
mhm,
I don't know how many years it took you to kind of grow and learn about it, but then you grew more the following year and you had
right,
not quite enough for the whole year, but like what a learning process. And
for
then the
sure.
next year you set a new goal based on that input from the
Hmm.
previous year. And you're like, oh, okay, if I want to have this for the whole year, then we need to increase it to this.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then you've increased it even more to the point where you have excess and you can sell to other people. Like what a what a cool thing to like just hear about that story and the progression, right? Because so
Hmm.
often we get in our own worlds
Right.
and we're like, this is what we need to do, and we get so frustrated because the goal hasn't been hit
Right.
or something failed. The first
We're
time I
hard on
remember,
ourselves. Yeah.
yeah, we're so
And
hard
I
on
will
ourselves.
say, like, a lot of my gardening goals fail. So, like,
Yes,
there's many times that I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to plant that. And, like, the insects take over, right? So,
yes.
well, clearly that one didn't work out. And in those times, I'm super grateful that
Yeah,
I do have grocery stores, that I'm not dependent on only what I grow, but that I think it's good to work on these skills and to build them as we go.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um,
So
I
fun.
will say the first garlic that I planted was just straight from the grocery store. I bought a head at the grocery store and I broke it apart into cloves and I planted it. And that was my first garlic
Because that's all it
growing
is. Like,
experience. And you can totally do that.
yeah, because it's
Um,
super simple. That's you just
yeah,
take a clove and
for
you plant it.
sure. And a lot of people don't know that you can do that.
Right.
So that's fun. And I did that for a couple of years. And then eventually I was like, I kind of want to know the variety that I'm growing.
Oh.
Because there's two different types of garlic. There's one that's it's called a hard neck
Mhm.
garlic, and one is a soft neck garlic. And I was really interested in growing garlic that I could braid and hang up the beautiful, great braided garlic and store that way. So I had a couple of types of
Wait,
garlic
because
that I,
time out really quick.
yeah,
So like, because if people have never grown garlic, all they know is like the little bulb in the grocery store,
yeah,
right? Or like minced garlic in a jar.
for sure.
And that's what you get after you process the garlic. But when you grow it and it's coming out of the ground, it actually grows this big giant stalk,
Mm-hmm.
green stalk. And that's what she's talking about. Like you can braid.
Yes.
It
So
comes from garlic
exactly.
plants.
Right. The
So,
garlic head has a stem that comes out the top with all the leaves, the foliage at the top. And the hardneck garlic has a really thick, it's pretty woody in the center of it, and it grows up, and you can't braid that because it's like hard as a rock. So the only thing you can do with hardneck garlic is to cut off the neck, cut off the top, and just store them in a bowl, which is totally fine too. They store wonderfully that way. But I wanted to create garlic braids. So I think they're beautiful and I was really inspired by them. So I set out to find soft neck garlic.
cool.
And specifically, you can braid any soft neck garlic, but I specifically wanted a certain kind and it's called Inchilium red garlic. And I don't know why I wanted that variety, but that was the one that was like inspiring to me. So I actually found some at like my local farmer's market. And I
Cool.
think I bought like 12 or 15 heads from the guy. And I was like, this is perfect. It's local. It's like from a farmer and
Right.
it's the variety that I want. If you buy it on the online, it's quite expensive.
Wow.
Like you're
Is
probably
it
going to pay
rare?
around $15 for like two or three heads of garlic.
Sure.
Or yeah, something in that range, $30 for that. Anyway, it's pretty pricey. Um, So, and you can do it that way for sure. The beautiful thing about garlic is you're going to grow, one clove is going to grow into a head, and that will produce, 10 to 15 new cloves. And then the next year you can plant those new ones, and you're just getting more and more garlic. So that's what I did. I bought my Anchilium red heads from the guy at the farmer's market, and I grew it out. And then the next year I had, like 10 times that much. And it just keeps perpetuating and getting more and more to the point that you can eat some and share some and, all the things. So
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
what I
that's
did.
so
And
cool.
yeah, now I can grow it. And maybe you can just share like your experience with growing garlic for
Yeah.
a minute, and then we'll
Oh
talk
man.
about some tips and tricks and things like that. It's
Right, right,
really
right.
easy to grow. Super easy.
Right. Super easy. So this is where I'm at. Laura is she's a much more advanced gardener than I am. I've always
Just been
desired
doing it
to,
longer, that's all.
yeah, she's been doing it a little longer than I have. And so a couple of years ago, I started my own baby garden, a little garden box that I was growing. And that is another story for another day, but I'm actually borrowing some neighbor's land at the moment because I don't have any land of my own. And so I have some really gracious neighbors that have let us put a garden bed on their property that they don't really use so much. So when I first started this about 2 years ago, I was really excited, but it was like right in the middle of the summer. And the first year we were just doing the normal gardening things. I wasn't even thinking about garlic. Laura and I kept talking. I kept calling Laura, like, what do I do with this? How do I figure this out? Like, it's a lot of fun, a lot of learning that went on in that first year.
First year's
First
always a
year.
lot of learning.
Yep. Learned a lot of cool lessons. So year two came around and had some successes, had some failures, learned a lot about that, learned more about my soil, different lessons that came along with year two. And then at the end of the year, because I was so focused on like spring and summer gardening that by the end of the year, I was like, because I had such limited space that I wanted to utilize the space really, really efficiently as much as I could. And knowing Laura's story about the garlic and being sufficient with it, self-sufficient with it, like that was one of the first things that she was self-sufficient with, or sustainable with, like it just really inspired me. And I was like, I love garlic so much. I want to be that same way if I can, or like at least plant some garlic. So I called Laura and I was like, I have no idea how to plant garlic, but this is what I want to do. And she just taught me. It was so simple. She said, go to the store, go wherever. I can't remember if I ended up at my farmer's market or if I just bought some garlic at the grocery store. Either way, right. I think I probably did a variety of the two. I think I bought a couple of heads at the farmer's market, but it was pretty pricey. The garlic that I had access to at the farmer's market. And I was like, I don't want to spend my whole take home paycheck on garlic, right. Kind of a thing. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So she taught me how to just to break apart the little clove, because I don't ever use like minced garlic in a jar. I've never ever been that person. I always take like a head of garlic when I'm cooking and chop it or mince it up or crush it with my garlic press or something. And P.S. garlic presses are one of the best tools in the kitchen for fresh garlic. If you don't have one, go and get one.
I like using a microflame zester, and I just grate it real quick too. So
that's fun. I don't think I've ever done that with garlic, but that's a good idea. So
I think it's easier to clean than my garlic press, but I do have one.
Really? My garlic press is so simple for me. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, whatever works.
I know, it's so great. So so she taught me just to take the little garlic cloves, because to educate you, a garlic head is the whole entire thing, like the round part, and then the garlic clove is the individual piece. If you didn't know that, then there's that. Right. In Spanish, I speak Spanish, and in Spanish, the word for the clove is actually a tooth, so it's a garlic tooth, which makes a lot more sense to me. Like it's like a little tooth.
You look like teeth, yes.
You look like teeth. So, clove, teeth, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, but so she just told me how far apart to space them. And the cool thing was, she said, plant them in the fall. They'll stay in the ground over winter. And I was like, what? I had no idea you could do that with some food. So she's like, oh yeah, no problem. So I planted my garlic in the fall, and she helped me figure out how soon before the frost date I needed to plant them, because she taught me that they had to start, the green part has to start poking up out of the ground.
We need to establish their roots first.
Yes.
Before they can move over winter.
Yeah, so we did that, and then she said that the next spring they would come up and continually grow, and then I think by June or July, roughly midsummer, you would have garlic ready to go. And I was like, that is so cool. So I planted my garlic.
On that note, I planted garlic in the spring and in the fall, and in the spring they grow as well, and but you're going to get teeny tiny heads. They're going to be little. If you plant them in the fall, they have lots of root strength that develops over the winter, and then they just start growing when they're ready in the spring, and they create big, huge heads.
You did not tell me that.
Recommended to plant them in the fall.
Cool.
You can plant them in the spring, but it works way better if you plant them in the fall.
I had no idea.
Usually in our area, which is Utah and Idaho, it's usually best to do like end of September, mid-October. So kind of right in that range.
Cool.
Plant garlic, yeah.
Cool. Very good. I did not know that. That's the reason why. I think it was just the timing of when I was calling and asking. You're like, you should plant it like right now. It was roughly in that time window. So that was cool to know. Good.
That's been my experience anyway.
No, and that's great. That's super great. So and then I planned on taking care of them in the spring, and I completely forgot to take care of my garlic in the spring, and it got really hot really quick that year, and my garlic died. It was so sad. I went out because they were growing the first little bit of the spring, and then I think it just got really hot really quick, and I forgot to water because I had nothing else in the garden, and I just wasn't in the habit of watering. So they died. But fast forward a couple of months, and I didn't plant anything much during that set growing season. We had really hot temperatures all summer and ended up being kind of in a drought and just really struggling with the watering of people's lawns and all things. But I didn't know that. I just wasn't really feeling super strong about doing a garden that year. And so I chose not to. And fast forward, found out about the drought and stuff. I'm like, oh, good thing. Like, okay, good choice. But as the summer started cooling off, I was like, you know what, I want to plant more of like fall crops. And so I started planting some some carrots and some beets and some lettuce and some kale, stuff that likes cooler weather crops or that's shorter cycle. So I planted some, and then a few weeks later I went out to like water them and to weed and to take care of them. And I had to call Laura because I was like, what the heck is this green thing growing in my garden? I had to do a video chat with her, and it took us a minute to try and figure it out. She was like, did you plant like grasses or wheat or something? And I said, no, I've never planted anything right here like that. She's like, well, it's flat. She was trying to figure it out based on the botany of the plant. And she said, take off a little piece of it and taste it. And so I did. I ripped a teeny little piece off the top of the green part. And I was like, what? That is garlic. Like, it was very, very garlicky. Right. So it turns out, I don't know if some of my garlic just hadn't sprouted in last fall or in the spring or whatever, but they were sprouting now.
Yeah.
And loving life
it
right now.
It probably just went dormant. And
right.
One year I forgot, I didn't get my garlic out of the ground soon enough.
Like in the spring?
You're supposed to, yeah. Many years ago, I didn't dig it out. And so the cloves just broke apart slightly. And then I had a whole bunch of garlic grow up like all together. And
like they're creating their own bulbs?
Yeah, but they don't work very well when they're tight together like that. So they weren't going to create heads.
Interesting.
So yeah, don't leave your garlic in as the entire head.
Huh.
You have to dig it up and like space them out if you want to be able to create a head because they need room.
Interesting.
Yeah, so weird, huh?
Interesting. One cool thing that I learned through the garlic growing process, and Laura, you're probably like 3,000 steps beyond this, but I'm more of a novice at this point. And so interesting with the garlic, there's kind of the bottom end and the top end of a garlic clove. And if you've never noticed the top and bottom end of a garlic clove, next time you see your garlic, check it out. So the bottom end is where it all kind of comes together at the bottom of the clove or the head of the clove. And then the top is the pointy part at the very top. That's where the sprouty part comes up. The greens come up out of the ground, and the bottom is where the roots grow. And so if you want to accelerate what I learned, I did some YouTube research because I love YouTube. And you can actually take your garlic clove and put them in a little jar of water inside of your house to kind of sprout them first before you plant them. But you have to make sure that the root part is down because them being in the water will activate their roots growing. And then you can transplant them outside. And I was like, that is so cool.
Right. So. Yeah, and the same mechanism happens if you stick them in the ground. The roots grow first.
Yes.
It absorbs all the water that creates roots first, and then it's going to send up a green stalk.
Right.
Out the tip. Yeah.
You want to do a science experiment with your kids or something? Like start in your fridge or in your countertop. Right. When I say in your fridge, like grab a little mason jar or a little glass container, put a little water in it, and stick the little garlic clove in there, bottom side down, and see what happens over time.
Right. Fun.
Watch it grow.
Yeah, and I guess we could talk about like how you plant garlic. Like, what are the steps if somebody wanted to plant it, right? So, I love growing garlic because it's so easy. I love things that I can plant. They take care of themselves, and then you dig them up. It's like super one of the easiest things you'll grow. And the fun thing is that you can plant them in the fall when you're not really like in major planting mode. So it's just nice it's pretty hands off.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed about garlic too. It's really, really simple to do.
Right. So, and not a lot of pests and things like that because nobody likes to, insects don't like to eat garlic.
Strong and potent.
Right. In fact, it's a good pest deterrent, right?
It is. That's cool. And on another note, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
that's okay.
Cool thing, if you've ever heard of people talking about eating spring garlic, like that's maybe like the little
what garlic?
spring garlic.
Green garlic, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they actually like you can actually eat the green part
Right.
of the garlic because it's very, very garlicky, but it's not as potent as the garlic clove.
Yes.
But you get that in the spring, like Laura was saying, if you plant it in the fall, it starts growing intensely, a lot more intensely in the spring, and you can use that, like chop it up and put it in salads or in your sautés or whatever, and that's what spring garlic is. And I think you can eat the garlic cloves too, but they're just going to be smaller.
Yeah, you
heads.
won't get as strong of a head.
Yeah, but anyway, back to
you're cutting off the leaves. But yeah,
yeah,
I know it's like, yeah, that's like a kind of a specialty food. But
right,
yeah,
right. It's not common that you hear.
it's gonna
like
be a little more mild than the
Yeah.
clove part. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you wanted to plant garlic, you need to get some garlic because garlic is not grown by seed like most vegetables are. It actually clones itself. So think about that. That's kind of weird, right? So it's an exact clone of the parent plant.
Cool.
So whatever you plant, it's going to grow that exactly. And then, so you're going to get, like we talked about, the head, and you're going to break it into its little parts and pieces. And then you want to make sure the pointy ends are pointing up. So you're going to dig a hole.
Take off the paper husky part.
I usually leave the paper on because I feel like it protects the plant from the moisture.
Oh.
And it's a pain to peel. So I just save myself the work. I just break it into pieces and leave the paper on and plant it that way. But do you peel yours?
I don't honestly remember what I did. I probably peeled them.
I think it would work if you peel it too, but I just feel like like nature would plant it with the paper on.
Sure.
And so I'm like, I'm not going to go through the effort to peel it if it wants to be planted with the paper on, right?
Sure. Yep.
So I just break it apart super simply. You can just, break them apart with your fingers. And then you're going to dig a hole probably about 2 inches deep. And you're going to stick it down in the bottom with the root side down and the pointy side up. If you happen to do it the opposite, the plant will like still grow roots and it will still send a shoot up because plants are smart like that, right? But you're going to want to help it out by getting the root side down and the pointy side up, like we talked about. And then you're going to want to space them probably about 4 inches apart in all directions. So I usually just make a grid in my planting area. You can like get a stick and like smash down a hole. You can dig a hole, whatever works for you. But basically just make a hole and space them about 4 inches apart and then make a grid, like a grid pattern. Stick them all in there and then cover them up. And like we said, plant them in our area about mid-September, end of September, beginning mid-October. So sometime in that range.
And how often do you need to water them?
If it's still hot in September and October, I'd water them a little bit, like probably every week or two. But they don't need a lot of water. Winter, we're going to get a lot more moisture, like rain and snow. So they'll have plenty over the winter. You don't need to water them in the wintertime. In the spring, I plant mine in the garden, and I can't grow anything without automatic watering. So mine just starts getting watering then too, but probably once a week. When it starts getting the higher temperatures, move up to twice a week or 3 times a week. But then you'll see in the spring, you probably won't see a lot of activity in the wintertime unless they happen to grow a little bit above the ground. You might see some green sprouts, but they're okay. And then they'll die back in the winter. And then in the spring, they'll just start growing, like probably even before you notice anything out there. Before I get out in the garden, my garlic's already up. And so it just grows when it needs to, and it's going to grow a big long stalk. It grows leaves out, and each of those leaves goes to a clove. So the more leaves on it, the bigger your head's going to be. Cool. So that's a little tip. You can kind of know how your garlic is growing based on how many leaves are happening.
I just thought it grew like a straight up stalk. That's all I thought it grew.
No, it grows up, and then it has branches out.
Cool.
And each one of those is connected to, it's giving energy to one clove.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. And then probably midsummer, June or July, you'll notice that the leaves start to turn brown.
Okay.
And when you start seeing the brown leaves on it, or like the tops tipping over, things like that, that's when it's time to dig it. You can just grab the top and pull it. I usually get a shovel and give it a little bit of lift, just so that I don't rip off the tops and things like that. If it's soft nut garlic, I like to let it dry for a week or two. And then I peel off some of the brown outside that's starting to dry out. And then I have a soft inner like green stem, and I just lay those together as best I can, and I semi-braid them. I've tended to use like some twine or some rope or something like that, just to give it a little more strength. You can just braid the tops and they should stay together, but I usually tie some twine around it just to give it some extra strength. And then I usually hang mine in my pantry. You can hang them in a spare bedroom, like wherever you want them to be, in the garage. And I just stick a nail in the wall and just tie a loop on my twine and just hang it up. That's usually what I do, but there's lots of ways to braid garlic.
Cool. And what do you mean by drying your garlic?
So it's called curing, and we do this with a lot of plants, especially in the fall. So squash, potatoes, garlic, things like that, but we're going to cure. And all that means is you're going to leave it in a place that it can get some airflow for a little while. So it just gives the plant a chance to like get a stronger outside, and not mold because that's too much moisture. So I usually just leave mine on a table outside on my patio, or you can like bring them in and leave them laid out on a table.
Okay.
Something like that. So you just want to leave them. Some people hang them from a fence post. You just want them to have some airflow, just so that the outside can get a little crusty.
Okay. And you've talked about, I know we're talking about other plants at the moment, right, too, but with this curing process, but potatoes, you've mentioned to me in the past, like you can just put them in a cardboard box and kind of put them in a dark space to like give them the airflow. So like cardboard boxes are great.
Everything stores differently, and you kind of have to learn those as you go, but I usually just put my potatoes in a cardboard box. Garlic, so after I braid it, I usually cut off all the roots just to tidy it up. So I peel off one layer of the papery husk, and then I cut off the roots and braid the rest, and I cut off a lot of the leaves at the top just to eliminate some of the plant material. So I'm really just left with the head, the green stem, and like no roots on the bottom, and it makes a really beautiful braid. You can leave the roots on. There's nothing wrong with that.
Cool.
You can even leave the papery husks on if you want to. It's just messier looking. But if you're not into the aesthetics, then like it doesn't matter. It stores fine with the paper on it. So
that's good. And then like how I know you mentioned in your story, right? Like learning how long garlic lasts for. Like do you like once it's dried and cured and stuff, like does it really just last all year long?
Yeah, it doesn't last for it probably does last for close to a year.
Okay.
Probably around 9 or 10 months. And you'll notice as it gets longer and longer, like you'll get some soft cloves that have disintegrated and some that are still firm. And so you're just gonna like anything that we store, you have to kind of like get rid of those parts that are not good anymore and just keep the good parts. So, but yeah, really, like by the time you're to the end of your stored garlic, it should be about time to harvest. So you could go out and like
a new
batch. Yeah. So by the time I'm to my end of my stored garlic, I can go out and like dig up a clove or two from the garden.
Wow.
And go there. What I will say, when you first dig it up, it's actually pretty mild tasting.
Oh, really?
Really interesting. It's not as strong when you first harvest it if it's fresh.
Wow, it gets stronger.
Because it's really watery still. So it intensifies the longer it's stored because it dries out.
Interesting.
And like it's fascinating. Huh?
I had no idea.
Yeah. That's been my experience, but it's a little more mild when it's fresh. So
Very, very, very cool. So total, this is a question I have for you. As you, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but like, I know your family of four, right? Two
uh-huh.
adults, kids. Um, Not that everybody's family is a family of four, but like just to
Sure.
give people kind of a target to shoot for.
Mm-hmm.
How much finances, or like what's the investment amount in order to start off like growing a year's worth of garlic? Like what
Mm-hmm.
does that look like up front? And if obviously you can be growing enough to produce enough cloves to grow the next year, right? Like
Right.
you don't buy anymore, but like what
Sure.
does that look like for a year's worth of
Yeah, I
garlic?
mean, it depends on how much you use it. So obviously you
Oh,
would use
that's
more
true.
garlic than I would because you use it more, right?
Right.
And so, but like for me, if I probably use a head of garlic a week. And it kind of depends on if you're cooking from scratch more or if you're
True.
canning pickles, you're going to use more garlic, right? Things like that.
Right.
So, I would say also it depends on if you want to have a specific variety
True.
versus just grocery store garlic. So you can go to the grocery store and buy two heads for $1. And so the investment to plant enough for a whole year from grocery store garlic would be pretty small.
Right.
Meaning like you could go and spend $4 and have enough garlic for your entire year
Wow.
for the following year when you harvest it, right?
Right.
From there, you shouldn't have to buy anything because you should just, it perpetuates itself from there. But if you want a specific variety, I would probably do like a 3-year plan. Me personally, this is what I would do. If I wanted a specific variety, I would find a place online or locally that I could get the variety. I would order my garlic and I would probably start with 1 or 2 heads. And then first year, I would probably grow out a seed stock, meaning I would just I would plant it like normal, like we talked about, the spaced out. And my 2 heads would now produce 10 times that. So now I'd have 100 heads.
That is
Sorry,
wild.
2 times 10. Sorry, 20 heads.
Funny.
Oh, sorry.
That's still wild to think about.
Like, yeah,
wow.
so then 20 heads the following year, I would take that and I would plant that and I would multiply that by roughly 10 cloves per head. Sometimes there's more than that in a head, right?
So
But
that's 100.
so that would be 200 and that would be my year that I would have enough to eat. So by year 2, the second harvest, you have enough to eat. And then you save part of your harvest to plant the next year. So you're going to take
Wow.
20 cloves again, 20 heads again, and plant your 200 for the next year.
Wow.
And just keep going and going. So that's how I would do it. I would just make a longer time period.
Cool.
Rather than invest all the money up front, although you can.
Okay.
So you can buy 20 heads. It's just going to be,
Pricey.
$80
Depending.
of garlic or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
So, right. Because especially if you're buying, even if grocery store garlic, like 20 heads of garlic is still, I mean, that's not terrible. It's maybe $10 of garlic, but
exactly. Yeah,
but
so if you want to spend $10 at the grocery store or $100 online on specialty garlic, then, that's kind of where you're at if you wanted to be like fully self-sufficient in garlic for a family of 4. So,
but I think this brings up an interesting point, right? Because it's like, I think we have to start with the end in mind. Like, what's your vision? Like, what are you desiring for your family? And you made that evolves as every chapter of our lives go, right? But it's like, as you heard in Laura's story, the first year she just went to the grocery store and bought grocery store garlic because she just wanted to grow garlic. And then she learned.
I just like seeing how things grow and trying new things. So
right. But then you got inspired by this other type of garlic I've never even heard of until today, honestly.
There's a lot of varieties. That's just happens to be the one that I love.
Right. I remember going
really well for me. So
yeah, I remember going to the farmer's market probably a year or 2 ago and seeing all the different garlic types, and I'm like a little overwhelmed because there was like 7 types on the table, and I'm like, I mean, they're all garlic, but yeah, I get that. So, but start at the end in mind, right? Like, what do you want for your family? Do you want something special, or do you just want garlic? Like, does that matter to you? And be aware of those things.
I think I chose this variety because I heard that it was really good storage quality, and I could braid it. So I knew that it was.
So those are 2 important things to you.
That's what I was looking for in a variety. And there's lots of different kinds. There's ones that are super pungent. some that are mild, some that are hard neck, some that are like you've seen elephant clove heads,
Yes,
like have
they're huge.
giant cloves, so it just
Yep.
depends on what your goals are and what you're looking for. So
I love that. And I think what I'm trying to bring up is just like, let's be conscious consumers, right? Like
for sure.
let's be thinking about these things and conscious of what we're starting with. Because if you're doing a 3-year plan, you want to make sure that you're getting the garlic that you're going to be happy with 3 years down the road. Or if you're putting $80
For
into
sure.
garlic, get the garlic that you want.
Right.
That's
Yeah, super cool. Okay. I did want to mention that I do have on my website, the carrotgal.com, there's a tab at the top called Shop, and you can click on that and it goes into my Etsy shop. And if I have garlic available, it's in there, and it's that in chili and red variety. So usually it's only available in the fall because that's when I grow it. So
Yep.
If it's fall time and you want to jump in there and see if there's some available, you can do that, and I will ship it to you. So there you go.
straight to your door.
There you go. Any other questions about garlic?
Oh, I know. I think
We very well covered it.
I think garlic is a well-covered topic at this point, and we are talking to people that are in. What's our growing zone? I'm not an expert necessarily at like the growing zone.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up too. I don't have it memorized, but
we're kind of in the 5-6 range, somewhere in there. So that's the temperate zone that we're talking about. If you're in a different climate zone, garlic obviously is going to be a different experience.
You just have to plant it at a different time of year. You want to plant it about a month before your first frost date, or right at your first frost date, that kind of a time frame.
So just adjust that based on your time and talk to your local experts on if you have questions, if you're in a different area than we are.
Yeah, and let us know if you have questions about garlic too. I mean, we're happy to answer them in comments or chats or anything like that. So, or the Facebook group.
Absolutely. Awesome.
All right. See you next time.